بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه إلى يوم الدين والتعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير ونفع الانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلال إلى الخير ابتغاء من جنائه ومرضاته قربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم. عدد كتب الكتب واكتب أبد الآبدين ودهر الداهرين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من أن أضل أو أجهل أجهل علي. اللهم أغننا بالعلم وزينا بالحلم وأكرمنا بالتقوى وجملنا بالعافية بالرحمن يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. طيب, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This is our first class in a series of classes where we will be covering the book called Sullam Al-Tawfiq. Tamam? In English, that translates to the ladder to success, tamam, and truly loving Allah Ta'ala. This is a book that was written by a great scholar whose name was Abdullah bin Hussayn bin Tahir, tamam, Ba'alawi. Scholar who was from amongst the people of God, someone of Ahlul Bayt, someone who knew the Sharia of Allah Ta'ala inwardly and outwardly and mastered it. He was born in the year 1191 Hijri in a town called Tarim. Which is in southern Yemen in a province or desert called Hadramaut. He, mashallah, this author, was very special. He was a man who revived the religion of Allah Ta'ala in his time. From a young age, his parents and his family put him on the track of scholarship and wilayah. So he actually had an older brother whose name was Tahir. And they were both, although his older brother was significantly older than him, they were both kind of studying together around the same time. And so they would go to class together, they'd come back together. They were so earnest in learning the religion of God that they would even, for example, they would read to one another. So if one of them was eating, the other would read to him. And they would switch once they finished. Even to the point where they say anything they were doing, they would read to one another and take turns doing it. So every single moment of their life was in benefit. And this hard work, that they put into studying the religion of Allah Ta'ala and taking the path of God was due to the pushing and the encouragement of their parents. And their other family members. So their aunt, for example, is narrated to have told them that if they were to just act upon the etiquettes of using the bathroom according to Sunnah Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right, that the light of knowledge would become manifest on them. And they succeeded in that, not just in fulfilling those sunnahs, but in, mashallah, reviving the religion, mashallah, in the valley of Hadramaut in their time. So he was a man who he studied extensively in Tarim with some of the great scholars of Tarim and Hadramaut. He traveled to Mecca and Medina and studied there extensively with scholars as well in his youth. And he came back and he eventually settled near Tarim, and that's where he began to spread the message of Allah Ta'ala. He spread the message of Allah Ta'ala there. Tamam? Naam. And he studied many great scholars, and he even had many students who eventually became great scholars in their own right. So oftentimes, if you want to get to know someone, you can know much about them and what their students were like, by knowing what their students were like. So for example, he had one student, Habib Abdullah bin Umar bin Yahya, who was a great scholar, great faqih, right, and a great man of God. He has a lot of fatawas that are published, tamam, in this time. He also had a student by the name of Habib Muhammad bin Hussayn bin Abdullah al-Habashi, who in his time became the Mufti of Mecca for the Shafi'is when he was there. So he was actually from Say'un. He studied with Habib Abdullah, and Habib Abdullah sent him to Tarim. The people of Tarim at that time, they told Habib Abdullah, can you send someone to us who can teach us the religion and revive it, right? Revive it. Teach the imams, teach the teachers. People were running the functions of religious life there, but they needed to learn more and have someone they can turn to. who preserve the religion solidly. So he sent to them Habib Muhammad bin Ali al-Habashi. Tamam? Habib Muhammad bin Ali, Muhammad bin Hussayn al-Habashi, who, again, went to Tarim, and he taught the book Fath al-Mu'in, and then he moved onwards to Mecca, and that's where he became the Mufti of Mecca in his time. So he was a great man, Habib Abdullah, right? He was a great man, a great scholar, a great caller of Allah Ta'ala, a great faqih, and his students as well, all followed his footsteps, and their shuyukh in general, the Prophet ﷺ in their entire chain of transmission, had those traits. And he passed away, Habib Abdullah passed away in the year 1272 Hijri. Tamam? 1272 Hijri. He passed away. And his grave is very much well known. It's right outside Tarim. Tamam? It's right outside Tarim. And he's written many books, right? He's written many books. This is a compilation of his many books in one volume. But the book we're specifically going to be studying is called Sullam Al-Tawfiq. In English, it's called The Ladder to Success. This translation that we're going to be using, inshallah ta'ala, is a translation by Shaykh Musa Furber. It's a white copy right here. Okay? You can find it online pretty easily for a good price, inshallah. And we'll start actually reading the book tomorrow or next week, inshallah. Today we're going to cover some introductory things that we need to know before actually going over the book itself. So, the first thing we have to talk about is, why did he write this book? So he wrote this book specifically, tamam, for a specific reason. And knowing why an author wrote a book helps you in better understanding and better studying it. So he wrote this book specifically, tamam, for the layman or the average person to study and come to know what's personally obligatory upon them, or what's called fard ayn. Okay? To know what's personally obligatory upon them, or what's called fard ayn. طيب. So, what's fard ayn? Basically, an individual, every individual needs to know what's called fard ayn, needs to complete what's called fard ayn, needs to know the knowledge that is obligatory for them to know. And this knowledge basically comes down to one thing. You have to know, tamam, you have to know what's obligatory for you to do and how to do it. And before you engage in something, tamam, that they may not even be obligatory upon you, you have to know how to do it as well, or whether you can even do it. So everyone has to pray, for example. Everyone has to fast. So long as a believer is pubescent and they are of sound mind, they have to pray and they have to fast in Ramadan. If you have money, you have to pay zakah. If you're able to, you have to go on Hajj. Okay, you have to generally stay from the haram. Tamam, you have to stay. You have to You have to do. You have to have positive character, prophetic character. Treat your parents right. Treat your neighbors right. All these things are things that every single individual has to do. Okay, knowing that these things are obligatory upon you, and knowing how to perform them, is considered fard ayn, because everyone has to do it. Then there are things that people have to do as they move on in life. So a child, for example, right, starts by learning how to pray. As they get older, they recognize, okay, well, they're getting older now, they have to work, right? They have to buy and sell, right? To buy food for the table, right? To provide for their family and themselves, right? Eventually, that child will grow even more and want to get married, right? So as they enter every phase in their life, there are things they want to do and rulings associated with those actions. The specific thing you want to buy or sell, the specific transaction you want to do, how do you do it? Is it even permissible for you to do, right? You want to get married, how do you get married, okay? Should you treat your wife? How should you treat your husband? And then there are things that are specific to time and place, for example. So for example, here in America, we live in a country that if someone passes away, okay, if someone passes away, their estate is distributed according to specific way that's mentioned in the books of law, books of like federal or state law. But if someone wants to make sure their estate is distributed according to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, they have to take measures, okay, and learn certain things and put things into practice while they're still alive. Okay, so these are some of the examples we have of what's considered personally obligatory or fard ayn upon someone. Some things everyone has to learn, some things that most people have to learn, like buying, selling, getting married, how to treat your spouse, right? And then some things that are specific to your specific circumstance. And obviously everything you want to do before you engage in, you have to learn its ruling and how to do it properly, right? So before a student, for example, wants to start a business, they want to hire individuals, they want to rent a place for a venue for their, or a place for their business. All these things mean what? They mean you have to learn what it means to hire. You have to learn how to hire, how to rent, and so on and so forth. So Fard Ain, it sounds like a lot when we count it this way, but if someone were to spend a portion of their life studying, even just a little bit every week, they would achieve it. Okay? Classically in the Muslim world, people would do that from a young age. By the time they reach adulthood, they're fine. Right? They've learned most of everything they need to know. And then once they become an adult, they just keep learning a little bit at a time, make sure they're whatever they've studied in the past as they were a child stays fresh in their mind, and they continue attending durus according to a schedule. For example, in the place where we studied in Salim, it's very common. In fact, most of the young men, right, they have the following schedule. They would, for example, go in the mornings to work. A lot of them own businesses, shopkeepers, or people of professions, like maybe they were construction workers or like metal workers or something like that. And then what they would do is after Maghrib they'd be in the masjid learning. So every day in the daytime they'd be where? At work, and then in the nighttime they'd spend an hour, right, an hour or two learning at the masajid and the halaqas with their ulama every day. Into their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. That was just their life, right? That was just their life. And so that's how it was classic in the Muslim world when it came to learning knowledge, okay? Now, this book specifically was written by Habib Abdullah, tamam, for the purpose of helping people in his time fulfill, tamam, their fard ain. Now, most of what's in this book is very much still pertinent to our time and place, right? Us as Muslims here in America, almost everything we're going to study here are things we have to know. There are things we have to know as Muslims. So he wrote this for that purpose. And so if someone were to read this book, they'd notice a few things. One, it's very practical. Two, it's structured in a way that most fiqh books that are intended for students of knowledge or scholars, people on the path of scholarship, it's not structured like those books, okay? The chapter sequences are different. The flow of the book is different. The way it sounds, the way the phrases are done is different. But it's intended for the normal person to read and to learn their religion properly, right? He goes into some extra details in the end that normally aren't found in books of fiqh, but for the most part, everything here is still considered to be fard ain. Okay, it's still considered to be fard ain. Tayyib. So before we start the actual book, there are a few things we need to talk about. The first thing is, right? What exactly is fiqh? Okay, so fiqh is, right? Linguistically, fiqh comes from the meaning, comes from the word faqaha in Arabic, which is to understand. It is to understand. So to understand, when someone, Prophet said in hadith, for example, "Man yuridallahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi din." The person Allah wants good for, Allah gives them understanding of the religion, right? Understanding of the religion. So it means understanding linguistically. Specifically, when it comes to Sharia sciences, he's talking about what? Fiqh is pertaining to the rulings, tamams, associated with human actions. Okay? The rulings associated with the human actions. So every action a human being does, okay, whether it's an action of the body, someone does something with their hands, they take, they eat, they strike, they write, okay, they pray, okay, an action of the body, or even an action of the tongue, they say something, right? Someone says something, okay, all right, and perhaps even actions of the heart, all right. Someone, for example, has in their heart malice for someone else, or they intend something bad against someone else. All these fall under the realm of fiqh. What are the rulings associated with these things? People's actions, their sayings, their intentions, what's in their heart. They're given rulings, okay? They are given rulings. So, what are those rulings? Generally, the rulings are going to be one of five. The first ruling is what's called fard or wajib, okay? It's what's called fard or wajib. So the first ruling is what's called fard or wajib, and that is what? That is obligatory. Okay, fard means obligatory, meaning if someone was to neglect to do this thing, they don't do it, okay, they are sinful. And if they do it, they get rewarded. These are things that Allah Ta'ala has strongly commanded individuals to perform. Okay, She strongly commanded individuals to perform. Things like praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan, paying your zakat if you have the money, right? if you fulfill the conditions. Going on Hajj if you're able to. What else is there, right? Being a good neighbor, okay? Being good to your parents, being good to your spouse, being good to your children, right? Providing for your family, okay? Having good character to the believers, not bothering them, not doing anything to harm them. All these things are just examples of what's obligatory. If someone does them, they get rewarded. If they don't do them, they get sinful, right? And again, it comes down to what? The fact that Allah Ta'ala has strongly commanded the believers to do them, okay? طيب, that is called fard or wajib. After that is a category called mustahab, okay? Has many names in Arabic: mustahab, mandub, sunnah, right? This category is basically what's recommended. Okay, it's what's recommended. Mustahab is a word used, mandub is a word used, sunnah is a word used, right? Recommended. طيب, what do we mean by recommended? These are actions Allah Ta'ala has maybe commanded us to do, but the command is gentler. Tamam? It's requested from us, but the request is gentler. Okay? It's not as strongly emphasized. Tamam? Or, for example, you can also interpret it as actions of the Prophet ﷺ. Tamam? Actions of the Prophet ﷺ, right? That he did throughout his life. Some of them were, he was persistent upon them. Okay? He did them, all the time, whether he was at home or traveling here or there. And sometimes there are actions that he did every now and then. For the most part, sunnah or mustahab are recommended actions. You can think of it as extra credit. Why? Because these actions, if you do them, you get reward. But if you neglect them, you're not sinful. Okay? If you neglect them, you're not sinful. All right? There's a hadith where a Bedouin man came to Prophet ﷺ, and he asked him what he has to do as a Muslim. Prophet ﷺ told him, pray 5 daily prayers, fast on Ramadan, give zakah if you can, make hajj if you can, right? And he outlined the basics to him. And the man said, Wallahi, I'm not doing an ounce more. I'm not doing any more than that. I'm doing exactly that, and that's it. And he walked away. The Prophet ﷺ turned to his companions and told them, he said, if that man is sincere and truthful, he will enter paradise. Telling us what? That things that are sunnah or mandub or mustahab and recommended, those things, right? If you leave them, you're not punished. If you leave them, you're not punished. If you perform them, you get reward. So our first category of rulings we said was what? Was obligatory. You have to do it. If you don't do it, you're sinful. If you do it, you get reward. Then you have sunnah. If you do it, you get reward. If you don't do it, okay, you are not sinful. Examples of sunnahs are, for example, the sunnah prayers before and after most prayers, right? For example, the sunnahs before Dhuhr, the sunnahs after Dhuhr, the sunnahs before Asr, the sunnahs after Maghrib, sunnahs before Isha, after Isha. What sunnah is a sunnah? What else is a sunnah? Like, having a beard for a man is sunnah in the Shafi'i school, right? For example, like wearing a turban, wearing a kufiya, dressing like the Prophet ﷺ is sunnah, okay? There are many sunnahs in the religion of Allah Ta'ala. We'll come to a lot of them, inshallah. Tamam? Naam. And then you have the third category, which is what? Which is mubah. Tamam? Actions that are essentially neutral. Actions that are essentially neutral. They're called mubah. These actions, right, if you do them, you're not punished. And if you don't do them, you're not punished either. There's no reward or punishment in these actions, whether you do them or not do them. These are your routine items, like day-to-day things that most people just go about without associating it with worship, such as eating, right? Eating, drinking, going to sleep, walking around, going for a hike, spending time with your family, potentially with your friends. Most of these actions are considered to be mubah, okay? In Arabic, it's called mubah. In English, we can consider it, you can call it permissible. You're allowed to do them, but there's no sin and no reward. It's just the way it is, right? You can do them, okay? This is the third category of the third category of rulings for human action. طيب, an action that is neutral like this, you can be rewarded for it if you have a good intention. Okay? You can be rewarded for it if you have a good intention. So for example, right, someone okay, just kicks it with their family or their friends, okay? They're having a good time, you know, having dinner together, maybe, right? Something very, very routine and natural, okay? Neutral. There's no good deeds or bad deeds associated with this, okay? But someone decides to do the same thing. They intend through it, putting a smile on their family member's face, putting a smile on their friend's face, okay? And they intend, for example, to keep family ties, to be a good Muslim for them, be a good companion for them, right? Have good character. This intention suddenly turns their neutral action into a good deed, okay? Turns their neutral action into a good deed. So neutral actions, permissible actions that have no sin or reward associated with them can garner someone a reward if they have a good intention. Similarly, if someone has a bad intention, okay, what happens now is they accrue sin through a neutral action. Someone, for example, right, decides to walk somewhere. All right, they're walking somewhere. Where are they walking to? Right, walking is neutral, right? There's no good or bad. There's no reward or sin associated with walking. They decide they're walking to the gas station to rob it. Okay, robbing a gas station obviously is not permitted, right? So every step they take is sinful because their intention of walking is to what? Do something bad. Okay, so neutral actions that are just purely permissible, if you have a good intention behind them, you get reward. If you have a bad intention behind them, you get sins, right? If you have no intention, khalas. They don't count for you or against you, okay? They don't count for you or against you. طيب. The next category is what's called disliked, okay? Disliked. In Arabic, it's called makruh. It's disliked, okay? Disliked actions are actions that Allah Ta'ala has warned people to avoid. He's warned them to not do them. But they have been, the warning, tamam, the warning against them is not a very strong warning, okay? Which leads to the following, that if you were to do a disliked action, okay, you are not sinful, but if you were to leave it, you are sinful. You get reward, okay? You get reward, okay? So a disliked action, an action that Allah Ta'ala warns Muslims to stay away from, those actions, if you do them, you're not sinful. But if you leave it for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, you do get reward. You do get reward, okay? You do get reward. طيب. So everything until here is permissible, right? Obligatory, recommended, right? The neutral permissible actions, and as well as disliked, everything up until here, if someone does them or leaves them, okay, there's no sin involved. Sorry, if someone leaves it obligatory, there's sin involved, but they're all considered permissible. You can do all these things. There's only one category of actions, if you were to do them, you are sinful, and that is called haram. Haram, impermissible, prohibited, okay? That is what, if you were to do this action, it is sinful. And if you were to not do it, it is not sinful. You get good deeds. These are things that we all know. Stealing, okay, oppressing people, you know, hurting someone, right? You know, someone, these kind of things, being bad to your parents, being a bad neighbor, all these things are prohibited. All these things are forbidden, right? If someone were to do them, they get sin. If they were to leave it, they receive good deeds, right? They receive reward. So, fiqh, the topic we're studying, fiqh, right? We said what? That it is a study of the rulings associated with human action. And these rulings are how many? They're 5. So human actions will either be obligatory, things you have to do. You do it, you get reward. You don't do it, you are sinful. Like praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan, being a good person, being a good son, or a good father, or a good husband, and so on and so forth. Or they're recommended, meaning if you were to do them, you get good deeds. If you don't do them, you're not sinful, right? Or they're just neutral. They're permissible, but they're neutral, meaning if you do it or not do it, it doesn't count for you or against you. But it can count for you if you have a good intention, or it could count against you if you have bad intention. And fourthly, you have makruh, which is disliked, meaning if you were to do it, it doesn't count against you, there's no sin. If you were to leave it, you get reward. And the final category is what? The 5th one, which is that is impermissible, something that's impermissible or forbidden, it's haram, meaning that if you do it, you are sinful. If you don't do it, you get reward. Okay, so the study of fiqh is the study of these 5 rulings and how they are associated with every action. So every single action we do as Muslims has a ruling associated with it. Tamam? Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. He said, every atom's weight, and everything someone does, if it's good, they will see the reward for it in the next life. And every bad thing someone does, the consequences of it, they will see it in the next life. So if every single thing you do, tamam, you will see the reward, the consequences of it in the next life. That means what? That means every single action you have has a ruling associated with it. One of these five, okay? One of these five, all right? Tamam. So, now, so the study of fiqh is the study of these rulings, how they associate with human action. Once you learn, okay, that there are things you have to do, right? The next question that comes to mind is, okay, I know I have to do this, but how do you do it, right? If someone were to tell you, okay, you know, you have to do, for example, if someone comes up to you and says, I want you to, tamam, photocopy this book for me, right? You would take it, and you'd ask them, okay, how do you want me to do it? Do you want a color photocopy? Do you want black and white photocopy? How do you want it bound? What kind of paper do you want me to use? What kind of size do you want the photocopy? Do you want a bigger one or a smaller one, a pocket size? Tell me, right? It's a natural question that comes to mind. If someone commands you to do something, asks something of you, you have to ask them, okay, how do you want me to do it, right? Someone, for example, right? For example, someone asks you, whether it's your mom or your spouse or someone, please set the table, okay, for dinner. Your first question is, well, how do you want me to set the table? What are we having for dinner, right? Do you want spoons? Do you want bowls? Do you want plates? Do you want knives? Do we need knives, right? How many people are coming, right? So after every command or every request is always a how. How do you want me to do it? If you don't do it the right way, it's like you've never fulfilled the request, right? So if someone says to their, like, you know, their parent or their spouse says to them, or like, you know, set the table, and they put out, you know, they just put out, you know, plates without forks and spoons, for example, right? And there's soup on the menu today. Have they done their job? They haven't done their job. The person who asked them will tell them, well, you didn't do it properly. It's like you never did it at all, okay? If someone tells you to photocopy the book, right? And you take it, right? And you photocopy just every other page, not the whole thing, or just certain sections, or you photocopy it really poorly. It's not legible anymore. You can't read it, right? In all these cases, you haven't done what was asked of you, right? You haven't done what was asked of you. So the natural question that comes to everyone's mind after they hear they have to do something is what? How do you want me to do it? And so furthermore, when Allah tells us, for example, to pray, He tells us to pray, right? You have to pray 5 times a day. Okay, how do I pray? Okay, He tells you, you have to fast. Okay, how do I fast, right? He tells you, be a good parent, or be a good child, be a good son or daughter to your parent. Okay, how do I be a good daughter or son to my parents? All these hows are also answered in the study of the science of fiqh, which we'll get to throughout this book, okay? So, answering the question of how is also an important thing, because if you don't do the how properly, it's like you never really did it at all. So if someone fulfills something according to how it was requested, right? Allah tells you, for example, to pray, okay? And you pray like you were taught, right? Like the Prophet ﷺ came and taught us how to do, right? That prayer is called valid. So if the how question is met properly, that is called a valid action. Just like how if someone, for example, sets the table properly, right? The way they set the table, we'd call it valid, okay? It's valid, it counts, right? It counts. But if it's not done properly, right? Someone doesn't pray properly, okay? Someone doesn't fast properly. Someone, for example, okay, they want to fast in Ramadan, they'll stop eating, but they'll keep drinking, okay? For example, right? Is that fasting valid? No, that's called invalid. So a valid action in the study of fiqh is an action that fulfills the how criteria, how it should be done, according to what Allah wants. It's done in a way that is pleasing to Allah Ta'ala. And if it's called invalid, if it's an invalid action, that means what? That it doesn't fulfill that how question. The question, right, the how it should be done is done against or not according to what Allah Ta'ala wants. So we have how many rulings now? Right? We said there are 5 rulings associated with every action a human being does. It's either considered an obligatory action, or recommended, or permissible, just neutral, or disliked, or haram. After that, their actions are then going to be called either valid or invalid. You know you have to pray. How do you pray? Did you pray validly or invalidly? Did you do everything you were supposed to or not? Okay? You were told you have to fast. Okay, I want to fast now. Okay? Did I fast properly or improperly? Okay, I want to get married now. Great, you can get married as a Muslim. You don't have to get married, but you can get married. Okay, did you get married in a valid way? Did you do it properly? Or did you do it improperly? So in all these cases, the question of whether we have to do something or not, and then how we do it, once we know whether we have to do it or not, all those questions are answered in the science of fiqh, right? Which we'll cover inshallah ta'ala, starting from next week when we start with the book, okay? But we just wanted to cover a few of these points in this class. So basically we know how to speak the language of the scholars, and we know what they mean when they say things in the book like a valid prayer, or a valid fast, or an invalid prayer, or an invalid fast. Or they use the words like wajib, or fard, or sunnah, okay, or disliked, or makruh. All that will become clear to us now as we start our journey throughout the book from next week, inshallah ta'ala. Do you guys have any questions? Ismail, do you mind just looking at any questions on the stream? Yes. The English title of the book is The Ladder to Success in Truly Loving Allah. The Ladder to Success in Truly Loving Allah. The translation is by Musa Furber. Okay? You can find it online. It's really easy to find. Not that expensive either. The actual author of the book, the person who wrote in Arabic, their name is Abdullah bin Hussayn bin Tahir. Abdullah bin Hussayn bin Tahir. The translator, yeah. Habib Abdullah bin Hussayn bin Tahir. No. It is the Habib on the book. No. And the author's name, the translator's name is Musa Furber. Okay? The translator's name is Musa Furber. Okay? That's right. Okay? That is right. Anything else? He does. He carries the Arabic and then he has the English right after it. Which is good, right? So if you understand the Arabic, you have the Arabic there. If you don't, it's still there. One day, if you learn it, you have it there in front of you. No problem. Yeah, no one's asking anything. Okay. No, it's fine. It's okay. Here. Just log into. Big.
So actions also fall under the science of
Yes, so actions of the heart fall in the science of fiqh in terms of their rulings, right? So for example, someone have malice towards a believer or toward a human being in their heart. They want bad for this person, they want to harm them, they're jealous of them, right? That action of the heart has a ruling. It's haram, it's impermissible, okay? But how to get rid of that disease of your heart, okay, and bad character is part of the science of tasawwuf, okay? All right? So we'll close there, inshallah, if no one has any questions, and we'll resume next week. So we close the fact that gives us tawfiq to seek beneficial knowledge, and that He gives us tawfiq to act upon and accept those actions from us. He gives us tawfiq to spread all over the world, make the Prophet happy with us, and rewards our teachers, our shuyukh, al-wins, wa hadrat al-Nabi. Okay. Bismillah. Yeah, sure. Salam. How you guys doing? It's good. Mashallah.
Just checking out the area. He told us to come up and listen to
Yeah, great. What are you guys' names?
I'm Samir.
Samir. Brandon.
We're both Ravens.
Oh, cool. Mashallah. You guys from around here?
Easton. We're from EPMA.
Easton. Where's Easton?
Maybe Easton. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Just a minute down, man.
Okay. I'm new here. I haven't really gotten I know Makanji, Albertus. I know Treks take time. Sure, we can go through it too. I'll just read it, but the class will be in English.
Did you want?
Are there questions? What's question? What is it saying?
There's one brother who said, what's the difference between fard and wajib?
Are they still online or they leave?
They still people.
Okay. So the difference between fard and wajib is that fard is in the Shafi'i school there's no difference between fard and wajib. They're both the same. They're just two words, they mean the same thing. In some other schools of fiqh, they differentiate between them in terms of evidence. If the textual evidence is stronger, they'll use the term fard. If it's weaker, they'll use the term wajib. Yeah.
There's another question from a brother saying, wouldn't aqidah issues have 50 rulings also?
Aqidah issues have fiqh rulings in the sense that like it can be obligatory for you to know something in terms of aqidah, right? So to know that a certain something specific about Allah Ta'ala, like you have to know Allah is one, right? You have to know Allah exists, okay? It's haram for you to believe that Allah has partners. In that way, there are fiqh rulings associated with it, yes. Yeah. That's it? Great.